Well, hi everyone. I'm so glad that our incoming 1Ls and our professors could join us for the very last session of Ask the Experts. As we were talking about earlier, we've been holding these about twice a month for our incoming 1Ls, and this is going to be our last one. The previous one that we had 2 weeks ago was a discussion with the dean. We had lots of questions about our current environment that we're in and how COVID is going to impact things. So I'm sure we'll have those questions. And I always start out with saying to our incoming students that we hope that you all are safe and your families are safe and healthy. We've been thinking of you all. If there's anything we can do, always reach out to us. We're thrilled to have you joining us in probably in about a month, I think, maybe a little less than a month. So today's edition of Ask the Experts, we have a panel of our lawyering skills and strategies professors. As you may or may not know, this is going to be one of the most important aspects of your law school career. And I'm thrilled to have these professors with us. So as some of you have done this with me before, we have a back and forth question and answer session, but I'd like to start out with our professors kind of leading the discussion. I believe Professor Reed is going to introduce the LSS department, and I'm going to have you start out with that. And if anyone has audio issues, chat me, email me, and we'll go from there. So with that, Professor Reed, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ann-Margaret. It is nice to kind of meet you. I know for one, when you're actually at U of H, I can't wait to see your real face and not just a black square with your name on it, but it's nice to see you. And I'm going to introduce myself in the department, and then I think as each of us has another opportunity to chat, we'll introduce ourselves a little more fully. My name is Hillary Reed, and I have taught 1L lawyering skills since 2007, and I've been at U of H since 2017 teaching lawyering skills here. And before that, I taught at Pepperdine, and before that I practiced at a large firm in Los Angeles, and so that's kind of how I ended up at U of H. I'm from Sugar Land originally. We may have some people from out there on today, but I wanted to talk at the beginning of this to tell you a little bit more about our lawyering skills and strategies classes and department, and just give you an overview, and we're looking forward to hearing what questions you may have. So at U of H, lawyering skills and strategies is the class that at other schools you may have heard it referred to as legal research and writing. We have a broader title because we try to introduce some broader skills as well versus just some of the traditional memo writing, brief writing, legal research skills that you get in a more traditional legal writing class. Just to kind of start out, I want to tell you, and many of you are probably already thinking this way, but I always think about becoming a lawyer. In large part, you're becoming a professional speaker and a professional writer. And so the skills you learn in lawyering skills and strategies are really going to help you hone those skills, whether it's a little bit of oral presentation, how you analyze a legal problem, the legal analysis side of legal writing, the actual written work product itself. All of those skills come together, and we focus on that in our class. U of H has really invested in its LSS program, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. First of all, I have fantastic colleagues, and there are 7 full-time LSS professors who teach lawyering skills and strategies. We have really small class sizes, which is a huge benefit to you students. Our classes over the last few years have averaged about 15 students per class, and then each professor has no more than 2 sections of those 15 students. So you actually are going to be able to get to know your professor, work closely with your professor, and that's something that makes a difference. If you have a professor with 30 to 32 students, you're going to have a lot more access to us than if we had 60 students or 50 students or 45 even. So U of H has invested in this program by allowing us to keep our class sizes small, and you can have that really nice, intimate environment in your legal writing section. It has a real seminar feel, which I think is a great benefit when we're talking about a writing class. So what we generally cover, each of us is a freestanding professor, and so we all have our own takes on little things here and there, but generally in the fall we cover predictive or objective writing, where it's predicting the outcome of something. Typically in legal writing, that's going to be memos or emails. So that's often what we're covering in the fall: legal analysis, legal writing, legal citation. In the spring, we're still doing a lot of those legal analysis, legal research, legal citation skills, and then we're putting them into practice with persuasive writing, so more of our brief or motion type writing. And also a lot of us do contract drafting in the spring. I know that's not universally done in the spring, but we all cover it somewhere. So you have some drafting experience in there as well. So lawyering skills really is about how to do the skills of lawyering. So you're learning, you know, the law in some of your other classes, and in our class, you're going to be learning how to practice law. And my goal for my students, and I know I share it with all of my colleagues, really is to make sure that when you go out next summer and you are a U of H law student, that you feel confident in knowing how to do things, and that you really represent our school well, and feel ready to kind of go out there into the practice of law and you know, help clients and be an asset to whoever it is that you're working with. So that's my hopefully brief introduction into our program. And I know Professor Hurd was I'm going to pass it over to her to talk about our writing center too.
Thank you, Professor Reed. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing as well as you possibly can right now. As Professor Reed mentioned, I'm Whitney Hurd. I joined the Law Center faculty in 2007. For the most part, I've taught legal research and writing, now lawyering skills and strategies, to first-year students in the full-time program. Before coming to the Law Center, I spent a couple years clerking for a federal trial court judge in the Eastern District of Texas. While working for this judge, I got exposure to both civil matters and criminal matters, and it was a really great opportunity to further refine my writing and analytical skills. I strongly recommend looking at judicial internships and judicial clerkships as a professional path. Regardless of whether or not you're assigned to my section, I'm happy to talk to any of you about my experiences with applying for a clerkship and serving as a clerk. It's definitely been one of the highlights of my professional career. Prior to clerking for the federal judge, I worked at a national law firm in Chicago, which is where I'm from originally. I was an associate in the litigation department, which basically meant I did a lot of researching, a lot of analyzing, and a lot of writing, which I absolutely loved. And so I think sort of the takeaway from my career so far has been that you can do a lot of different things with a law degree. You can work for a law firm, you can work for the judiciary, you can work in the academy, maybe in-house, maybe a nonprofit. And so I'd really encourage you to sort of use your law school years to explore these different professional paths by talking to your professors and talking to the CDO counselors and talking to alum and learning as much about what you can do with a law degree. It's pretty amazing. As far as the Legal Writing Center, Professor Simpson and I are the co-directors of the Legal Writing Center, which is staffed by some outstanding 2L and 3L students. They all have one thing in common, which is they have exceptionally strong lawyering skills. We're also very fortunate to have many 2Ls and 3Ls serving in the Legal Writing Center who do have prior teaching experience and tutoring experience, which is awesome because we really see the Legal Writing Center as a resource for first-year students. You can go and meet with a fellow in the Legal Writing Center and they can answer any questions you may have about ungraded exercises and perhaps graded assignments to a limited degree depending on your LSS professor. But they cover lawyering skills like how to conduct legal research, how to issue spot, how to brief a case, how to improve your legal writing style and usage, how to cite to different sources. So you can either schedule an appointment or you can sort of Zoom in if we're virtual. But it's a really great opportunity to talk to somebody besides your LSS professor about these important lawyering skills and sort of get their insights into what helped them in law school. The other reason I really encourage my students to go to the Legal Writing Center is to just talk to the fellows about their experiences with law school. So what study skills, how do they develop those study skills of preparing for class and outlining for class and preparing for exams? Come, the spring semester, if you're interested in doing a write-on competition to join the Law Center's Law Review or a journal. They're a great resource to talk about participating in the write-on competition or trying out for our moot court teams or mock trial teams, even which courses to select second year and third year. They've also been helpful with looking at students' resumes and writing samples and prepping for interviews. So as a first year student, I really encourage you to go to the Legal Writing Center as often as possible to sort of take advantage of these outstanding students who are serving as fellows. And as a 2L and a 3L, very selfishly, I would encourage you to think about applying to serve as a fellow. It looks great on a resume. It's an awesome topic of conversation during interviews. People always want to know, what does it mean to be a fellow? What kind of stuff do you do? It also helps develop and strengthen your legal writing skills and your legal research skills, because in order to teach somebody else these skills, you need to understand these skills. And then I'd like to think an added bonus is that you get to know your LSS professors even better. I've written a letter of recommendation for a fellow in the Legal Writing Center. In fact, some of our fellows have gone on to win legal writing competitions as well as secure judicial clerkships. So that's my plug for the Legal Writing Center. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later in today's panel, but thank you all for taking the time to be here with us today. I think that says a lot about your commitment to your legal education, and I'm already impressed.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Hurd. Professor Gomez, Professor Bream, and Professor Simpson, would you like to introduce yourselves, or I'm going to leave that up to you folks if you'd like to, and tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to U of H?
Sure. This is Professor Brehm. I'm happy to talk briefly, mostly because I just answered a question in the chat. So my name is Catherine Brehm, and I have taught legal research and writing, LSS, here at the University of Houston for 12 years. This is my 12th year, I guess, coming up. I practiced for about 15 years before that, so do the math, and I think I may be the oldest person on this call. In any event, I love legal research and writing and lawyering skills, especially as we call it, because it is so much broader and we can focus more on some transactional skills. One of the things that I always like to tell my students, and I'd like to impress upon you guys, this is a class that a lot of times students say, why am I taking this in my first year? I should take it when I'm getting ready to go practice 3 years later when I'm getting ready to take the bar exam. And the truth is, the skills that we teach you in this class are analytical skills, writing skills, and to a lesser degree research you will find useful as you go through your first year of law school. So a lot of the skills that we're teaching you are things that make you a better law student first, and then you move from that into taking what you've learned in this class and preparing writing samples for your interviews, and then moving into your practice 3 years from now once you pass the bar. So think of the class in that way. Our first task is to make you good law students. And one of you asked about some things that we might recommend for you. I have for many years taught this class and additionally a similar class to our foreign LLM candidates. So these are people who are trained lawyers from other countries, and they struggle particularly with understanding the federalism concepts of the US legal system. So I found these videos, but they don't just focus on federalism. They focus on a lot of things that you sort of need to have a good foundation for at the beginning of school. If you watch numbers 1 through 9, which are what I told you, it's about 25 minutes of your time, and it's an excellent use of time. I know many of us will have other resources, but thank you so much for being here. I look forward to meeting all of you, hopefully in person sometime soon. Professor Simpson and Gomez, you're on.
I'll go ahead. So my name is Alyssa Gomez, and I too teach LSS. I've been at the Law Center since 2017. Prior to that, I ran a pro bono legal aid organization here in Houston called Houston Volunteer Lawyers for 6 years. And before that, I was an associate and then partner at a big law firm doing commercial litigation. So lots of experience with legal writing in various contexts. And I can echo what my colleagues have said, that this is a critical class, and it's actually quite a fun one because we get to know you really well and you tend to get to know your classmates well. We're all hoping that we can replicate all that in the current environment, because it's a really special class and group and way to get to know what ultimately will be what you do every day as a lawyer. By the way, on the question of what to do to prepare, I usually tell people to just rest.
Yes.
Excellent counsel. I'm Lauren Simpson. I have been teaching at U of H since 2010. My first year teaching the full-time students what was then legal research and writing. And from that point forward, teaching the part-time students at night, which I love. It really, I connect with it, and I enjoy it a lot. So I graduated from the U of H Law Center, go Cougs, in 1994. I practiced for a little over 2 years at a small maritime insurance defense firm, which sounds about as exciting as it was, and learned that really my skill set lay in research and writing and in talking about the law with judges and other attorneys. And so I transitioned to one of our local state courts of appeals at that point, and was there for over 13.25 years as a staff attorney, which means that I had one of the coolest jobs I could ever have imagined for my personality. I see Professor Hurd nodding. Instead of the trial level, I was at the level we call an appellate level that you'll study this first year, which is where they review what happened in the trial court. And I help judges write their opinions, and I supervise the interns and train the first-year law clerks in how to write judicial opinions. And for various reasons, I was a teacher before I went to law school, and I missed teaching. And I sort of whet my appetite on it again by doing guest lectures at U of H when I was at the court, and by teaching the interns and the law clerks at the court. And so I threw my hat into the ring back in 2010 and haven't looked back. This is definitely the hardest job I've ever had, but the most fun job I have ever had. I echo everything my colleagues have said, not only about preparing for the semester before it begins, but also about how important this class is. Truly, this is an anchor class. You will use these skills from this point forward. It will help you in your other classes where you learn the content of the law, and it will help you in the practical real world afterwards. Welcome everybody, and go Cougs.
Thank you, Professor Simpson. So I just wanted to start out with just one point, and then we're going to go right into questions. And one of the things that I often talk to students that are contemplating law school, so I get to be with all these people right up until the day of orientation, then I lose everyone. But what I talk to them about is law school, and particularly legal research and writing, is so important because as you come to law school, you almost have to retrain your brain as to how you're writing. People that have a prose writing background have to really kind of switch their mindset and switch their how they write. And I know that's how it was for me when I started in law school. I love to write, but it's a very difficult technical writing. So can you all speak to that a little bit in terms of someone that's never had any experience to law school and they walk in the first day of legal research and lawyering skills and strategies, and how to help that shift and what it's going to feel like when they first get in? I'll let anyone jump in.
Oh, Kate, do you want to, Professor Brem, do you want to go?
I'll speak after you, Professor Simpson. You're up.
Okay. Yeah. So the global point that I would make, I usually tell this to my students, is that everyone brings something to the table for legal writing. So legal writing is technical writing, but it's also a hybrid of that and the kind of undergraduate prose that people in liberal arts would be familiar with. But it's not 100% like liberal arts writing, and it's not 100% like technical writing that those in STEM undergraduate courses would have had. But rejoice and be glad, because you bring half of that skill set with you, regardless of what you studied below. And the other reason to rejoice and be glad is that the other half is learnable. So legal writing, it uses the structure that will be familiar to STEM's background students. You begin with the end, you end with the end, you tell the reader where you are in a very organized fashion. There's a logical progression. But it also uses that kind of the rhetorical devices and the clarity in prose and the rest that those who are English majors and liberal arts majors will also be familiar with. So come ready to unlearn what you know and to be open and receptive to learning the other half of the equation. So that's sort of a backstory, and I defer to Professor Brehm.
And the reason I wanted you to go ahead, Professor Simpson, is you and I've had this question before, and I knew you had a beautiful answer. I echo everything Professor Simpson has said to you. The thing that I think is most frightening for students is people coming with STEM backgrounds to law school. And I always say to you guys, don't worry. Legal writing is just a beautiful mesh of, you know, kind of beautiful writing skills that you have sort of from the liberal arts background, but it's also incredibly formulaic. And so for those of you coming from the STEM background, you're going to get that formula. It's written much like a lab report. You're going to start with your conclusion. You're going to then explain how you reached your conclusion, and then you're going to end with your conclusion. My liberal arts students find that stifling. So I would say I had an engineering student one time who was a first-year student of mine, and I promised her, I will teach you how to write. It's fine. And she went out into practice, and I hear from her periodically still. I think she was my student 6 years ago, back from 2014. And every once in a while, she'll still send me an email and say, the people at my law firm think I'm a brilliant writer. It's unbelievable. Because she was just really, I'll be honest with you, kind of a straight, kind of B+, A- student in my class, no matter how hard she worked. But she got that formula, and she's an engineer and for a Liberty firm now with a bunch of other engineers who became lawyers. So she does all of their writing for them, and she's beautiful. So anybody can do legal writing. You just need to recognize your strengths. And I did notice briefly that one of you asked about what if English is not your first language. One of the best pieces of advice I can give to you, and I tell this to my foreign students all the time, please make use of the Legal Writing Center that Professor Hurd talked to you about. A number of our legal writing fellows will have experience with multiple languages and having actually taught English as an additional language in past lives. And so to the extent that you have questions about that, that's an excellent resource for you. And of course, your legal writing professors, we can help you with that too. The Legal Writing Center is out there, but don't be afraid to talk to us as well. I know my colleagues have plenty to say too, so.
I'll and say that you will be getting a lot of feedback from your LSS professors, written feedback, oral feedback. And so I would say my bit of advice would be, don't resist the feedback. The students that I've seen really thrive are the ones who accept that feedback, who ask questions about that feedback, who incorporate that feedback into their writing. And so I would say if you could just sort of enter into your law school career with an open mind about your writing, whether in the past you have found writing to come easy to you or to be a real struggle, if you could just come in with an open mind, I think you would really find that you will be given the tools that you need from your LSS professors to become a strong legal writer.
Great, thank you. Who else would like to jump in on any more of this? I think it's...
I have an answer to another one of the questions in the chat that I totally agree with Professor Gomez on resting, but if you're like, I'm resting enough already, maybe give me a book suggestion or something like that. I had a email conversation recently with someone, and so I had put together a list of books that I suggested. So I'll give you couple of suggestions that if you're finding yourself with some time and you want to do a little reading before law school, I'll give you some thoughts, because I will say it is hard. This is probably not surprising. Once you start in earnest in August in law school, it's very hard to do supplemental reading to all the reading that you're going to already have from your classes, including ours. So for legal analysis, there's a book called Deconstructing Legal Analysis that I like by Peter Wendell. And so that's Deconstructing Legal Analysis by Peter Wendell. There's Reading Like a Lawyer by Ruth Ann McKinney, which helps you make sure that you're getting what you need out of your reading assignments, not just for LSS. As Professor Simpson mentioned, the skills we focus on, particularly in the early fall, these legal analysis skills will carry with you for your entire law school career in all your other classes, on your other final exams. So really figuring out how legal analysis works and fits together is important. In Reading Like a Lawyer, getting what you need out of it. For writing style, I like Legal Writing in Plain English. That kind of helps you see, you know, many of us come into law school thinking that lawyers, you know, we've read the car lease agreement that we've signed, or the rental agreement that we've signed, or other things written by lawyers that are sort of dense, incomprehensible, and like poorly written, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. And we think that's what we're going to get into legal writing and learn how to write, just like very thick legalese type writing. And that's not what we want you to do. So that's why I like that book, Legal Writing in Plain English by Brian Garner. So those are my three like pre-law ones. For persuasive writing, I really like one called Point Made by Ross Guberman, but I assign that for my students in the spring. So it's one that's a little bit further down, and I don't want to overwhelm y'all with my suggestions, but those are just the three kind of, if you had a few weeks and wanted something, I think any of those would be a good choice to chew through. Also, style guides, like really, we're all very nitpicky on legal writing because lawyers expect perfection in final work products. And so making sure that you're kind of ready to edit with a very sharp eye. I think if you feel like that's something that you could grow in, there's decent books out there to help you kind of brush up those skills if it's been a while.
Great,
And I'll say
thank
for those of you who like,
Professor Gomez, did you want to jump in, or I can move on to another question, whatever works.
oh, I was just going to try to
Sure.
share what I put in the chat, which was my recommendation, which is lawschoolplaybook.com. It's got some great options.
Great, thank you so much. Professor Gomez, did you want to say anything? No?
I think everyone covered it. I just would remind students that everyone's in the same boat when you come in. No matter what your undergraduate background was, this will be brand new to everyone. So lest you think anyone has a leg up, it's not true. Everyone has to sort of relearn, but by the end of the first year, you will all be very close friends and peers, having gone through the experience and changed the way you think forever in a good way.
Absolutely. So one of the questions that I've gotten before, and I'm just going to throw this out here, is what makes, or if you have kind of one or two or three or however many tips for what makes a student successful in your classes? What are the best practices that they've employed? What are the tips that they've adopted? It can be from, you know, anything that you can think of, but in your years of experience, what makes a successful student in your eyes?
I'll go first since I went last before, which is I think successful students are, I think they're humble. I think they come in, you know, ready and to learn and work hard. This is not an easy profession, but it is a rewarding one. And so I think it's worth it, but there's really not an easy path. The way to make it easy for yourself is to stay on top of your work, as difficult as it is, so that you don't get behind, whether in our class or some other class, and really to kind of heed our warning that law and law school take a lot more time than anyone ever expects. And so when someone tells you you have a month to write something and we suggest that you get started right away, the students who do best actually do that. And I am a natural procrastinator. So I feel very much, my colleagues are laughing because it is very true. But you have to learn how to put that aside during the first year of law school, which I did. And I went back to procrastinating 2L and 3L year. But really, you have to stay on top of it. The volume of material is just really big, and the complexity of what you're reading is difficult, and it just takes time to do it well. But if you take that time and invest it early on, it will pay huge dividends as you go through law school. And I would say doing that the first semester will set you on the right course. And that's true with our writing class as well. On assignments, you think, oh, I'll be able to knock that out in 4 hours or cram and do it like I used to as an undergrad, and it just doesn't translate. And so it's a difficult reality to swallow, but the sooner you kind of accept it and move forward, the better you will do.
Great point.
I guess I'll add a sort of dovetail on that. I totally agree with Professor Gomez, and that's my first tip for all my students. Start early, map it out, and keep tabs of how you're progressing, right? It's the volume, the sheer volume is very different from what most of us experienced in undergrad, and the type of exams and papers that you write are also different. Because of that, I would add this as a tip, that, like Professor Hurd said before, be open to feedback and seek feedback. Our classes are small, and you'll get to know your first year professors really well, but especially your LSS professors, because our classes are even smaller than those of property and contracts and torts. Take advantage of that. We have office hours where, unless an assignment's due, sometimes not many students show up. Show up. And those students who come to those office hours and start early enough where they can ask questions in advance for pre-guidance, and then who seek feedback periodically, whether the assignment is graded or not, whether it's big or small, and those who accept the feedback after the assignment's turned in, those are the students who do the best. So make sure that you start early enough where you can get your counsel and advice from your professor on any assignment before it's due, and then make sure after it's turned in, if you don't understand the feedback or you have questions related to the feedback you got, then make sure you follow up with your professor. I think that's a huge step to improving your writing. And only those students who really focus on and incorporate that feedback for the next and subsequent assignments, I think those are the ones who make the biggest strides in improvement. So don't be afraid to reach out. We welcome your coming to us.
And I'll actually add something about, you'll notice in your LSS class that you'll get a lot of ungraded exercises. Just because they are not for a grade does not mean that they are important. So we're talking a lot about feedback. You're going to get a lot of feedback. Use feedback. Ask questions about feedback. But that feedback is only going to be as good as the effort you put into the ungraded exercises. And so even if it's not worth 10 points, 15 points, 30 points, pretend that it is, because the better your work product, the better our feedback. And I can't tell you how excited I get when I can tell students put a lot of time and energy into an ungraded exercise, because I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be such good feedback. And so it's strange to put so much effort into something that doesn't result in a grade short term, but it will 100% influence your grade in the long term.
Absolutely. Anyone else on this point?
I have a couple of things to say. I really second everything that everyone has said before me. with regard to LSS, starting early on those assignments are really important. And the reason for that, I always think it's helpful to know the reason. One of the things that lawyers do is they really think critically. I have two little girls who are all grown up, but my husband's also a lawyer. And I remember when they were little kids, they would ask my husband, "What are you doing?" And he said, "You know, I read and I think and I write." And that's pretty much his job description. And that's what you're going to be doing in law school. But the emphasis is on the thinking part. And it takes a lot longer sometimes to get to the answer that you need. There is no one right answer. It's all how you argue it. So it takes longer to think about how you want to process an argument and make an argument. And that's why it takes extra time for those writing assignments. The other thing I would say, and this applies in LSS, but also in all of your classes, because of this very critical thinking issue, I highly recommend you prepare for class, go to class, and then take some time. It may be while you're standing in the shower or running or going to the gym or whatever it is you do to relax these days. Think about what you learned in class. So go to class prepared, and then attend class, and then afterwards spend a little bit of time thinking, what is it that I learned today? Why did the professor teach me that in this particular order? What point is he or she trying to make? And I think those are, if you keep that in mind, you will be a very successful student.
I think we just had a question related to Professor Hurd's point. How many ungraded exercises and graded assignments should we expect to have during the semester?
I guess since I brought up the point, I will answer that question first. I would say it's a great question. And like you'll find in law school, the answer is it depends. And in this case, it depends on the professor. I would say for my LSS class, I typically try to have an ungraded exercise for each class session. It might be a very small, quick, and easy ungraded exercise, or it might be a longer, more demanding ungraded exercise, but I usually like students to be thinking and preparing something in advance of class. As far as the graded assignments go, I think I have about 4 graded assignments. So for me, there will be a graded email assignment, a graded memo assignment, a graded research assignment, and a graded citation assignment, in addition to a professionalism grade. But that's very specific to me. And so I will definitely let my colleagues sort of share their approaches with you as well.
Anyone want to jump in?
I think we're all pretty similar to what Professor Hurd described. I don't know that I have an ungraded assignment every day, but most days there's something that you will do for me so that I can give you feedback. The more feedback you don't learn how to write without writing. The more feedback I can give you, the easier it is for you to understand what it is you need to be doing. So in that regard, we have that. For ungraded assignments, I think I have 3, a citation, a client email, and a memo in the fall. And it's somewhat different because we focus on I focus on contract drafting and also on persuasive writing. But so there's usually 2 graded assignments in the spring, but of course it's a 2-hour course in the spring and a 3-hour in the fall.
Great. So if the folks that are on the 1Ls, the future 1Ls here, remember we had the professor panel, and I think it was Professor Chandler and professor panel by specialty. I think it was Professor Chandler and Professor Wells that talked about how critical it is you can't treat law school the way you may have treated it in undergrad, kind of go to class here and there, and then at the end, finish up and procrastinate and cram at the end. That's not going to work for law school. So because of the cumulative nature of how you learn, and particularly in our LSS classes. So with that question, what are some pitfalls that students run into in your experience, and how can we avoid that? Or how do you recommend to avoid that?
I'll jump in on this, and then I'm sure we can all think of additional pitfalls too. So it's the flip side of some of the success tips, obviously. I think procrastinating. There are things that we will ask you to do in legal writing that take more time than you reasonably think it should the very first couple of times you do it. For example, Legal citation, when we're citing in legal writing, we use the Blue Book, and it's a pretty large and intimidating to some, but you'll get used to it. It'll be fine, but it will take you a long time. The first couple of times you have to try to do your citation in a legal memo. And so if you leave it till the night before or the morning of, you'll be scrambling, and that can really kind of, it'll fall apart at that point. So I think that's a pretty major pitfall that I've seen. When we get to the research component, sometimes procrastination doesn't look like, oh, I'm just, not kind of checking things off that I need to do. Sometimes when you've got an assignment, we'll refer sometimes to them as closed memos and open memos. Closed memos mean that we've given you the cases and statutes and things that you're writing your document based off of, and then an open universe document or memo, you would then have to go out and do the research. So I've seen plenty of earnest, diligent students who on their open memo just research and research and research and kind of don't get to the point where they're ready to start writing, or like they should have started writing. They just kind of, there's almost like this hurdle they can't jump, and they don't want to start writing until everything is perfectly tied up in a bow. And so I think forcing yourself to get past that and really stick to a schedule and know, and all of us I know talk about this kind of thing. So like, listen to us when we say like, you should be writing, a week or two before this is due, take that advice, listen to it. And then I think another pitfall is if you're feeling a little lost or confused or overwhelmed, kind of not reaching out as early as possible. So we're all like, I think all of us do this job in large part because we love working with students, and you coming to us and asking questions is, we love that. That's why we're doing this job. So, I really encourage people not to struggle silently alone. And then again, kind of at the last minute, let us know that you're flailing. So get ahead on things and then reach out if you need help. Those are the things that I would say are pitfalls that I typically see.
Anyone else want to jump in on that, or we can move on to another one?
I'll
I think
just
that,
add.
oh, go ahead, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
I'll just add that, again, another flip side to one of the tips we gave is the acceptance of feedback. The flip side of that is not resisting what you're being asked to do. I think the only students I've had who actually kind of don't get the hang of things in time for their grade at the end of the fall semester are the ones who spend the first 10 out of 14 weeks just digging their heels in and kind of refusing to come along for the journey and kind of fighting back with, why would we do that? Or just not willing to really do what's being asked. And then they're surprised when at the end of the semester, their grade isn't that good. And so I think to the point at the very beginning here, none of us are mean. We're all very nice and we really want to help you. And our greatest joy is when your writing looks really good. But you just have to trust us for the first couple months that it will be, if you kind of follow this technical formula, and it will be like that for your whole career. So you really only have to learn it once, and then you relearn it for the next 20, 40, 60 years of practice. So I just encourage you to come in with that open mind, and we want you to be questioners and thinkers. Definitely in the doctrinal classes, and when it comes to LSS, you kind of have to stick to the formula. So it can be unnerving and a little like, wait, I have to, but yeah, you kind of do. And so we're right there along with you, and all of us went through it, and all of your other professors have been through it, every lawyer on earth. And it's not a hazing ritual by any respect. It's just a way of writing that later on you will forever not enjoy reading non-legal writing. So there's a little learning curve. So just be patient and trust.
I completely agree with everything my colleagues have said. I emphasize that. The thing I will add to it is that once or twice during the semester, usually before graded assignments, most of us will have conferences with our students where you have X amount of time with one-on-one FaceTime with your professor to ask any questions that you have. Sometimes students will come in without really having thought through questions, even if it's, oh my gosh, I'm stuck and I don't have a lot already done, but here are my concerns. So I think coming in without sort of an outline of what you want to talk about, sort of informal thought process about that without questions formulated, means that your FaceTime with your professor is not going to be as productive. On the flip side, those students who really benefit from the conferences come in with, some questions in advance. Again, even if you haven't been able to get that far on it, don't not prepare. Come in and say, these are the areas where I'm having difficulty, right? And if you're beyond those basic impasses, then come in with specific questions. I guess that would be my only addition to this.
Great, thank you so much. So one of the questions that I know has been on everyone's minds right now, and someone just asked that, is what do we see, or how do you feel classes are going to be handled in light of COVID and coming up shortly? And I know that's a very fluid situation. I know that Dean Mensa is working day and night on this one. So we'd love to get your opinions on this. And to our 1Ls, as soon as we have very clear information and definitive, and as things change, I can assure you, you will be informed. But I'm going to let the professor speak to that, and maybe how your experience was in the spring. With that, I'll let you all jump in.
Well, I'll start and say, as I mentioned earlier, we all have, we work together closely, but we all are autonomous in how we run our classes. So as we each kind of say some of our own thoughts, that there's not a departmental LSS decision as far as, online or in person or anything like that. We're of course following the guidance from our administration and from the general U of H kind of guidance as well. I thought online learning went really well in the spring for my classes. And I got good feedback on it from my class evaluations. I've taught online before in other areas, and I took a hybrid approach where I did about half of my weekly lesson plans asynchronously that I posted on our class management system, and then I did about half of our normal time in person or online asynchronous or synchronous together. So kind of split it up so that we had time together where people could ask questions, and then did some of it where students could work on it at their own pace online. I am hoping for myself, to the extent that we are having on campus in-person classes, to do the high flex approach, where I'm in person in a socially distanced classroom, also having the ability to incorporate students who are distance learning as well. I think it'll be a little bit to juggle at once, but that's the beauty of us only having 15 students per class period. I think I can manage that, and as long as it's safe for me and for those students, I'm anticipating being in person at least some of the time. And I think that's what you're probably going to hear from all of us, is that we're each making an individualized decision that we think will be best for our students, our own families, and for you, and taking the guidance that we have from all of those making the decisions who are at layers above us. And I know my colleagues, some of us will be online only, some of us may have a little bit of a more hybrid approach.
Great, thank you. Let a next one jump in?
I would just add that this is a rapidly changing situation. Obviously, when we were teaching online in the spring, we thought that would be the end of our distance learning quite quickly, and that hasn't turned out to be the case. So I think all of us are having to have a real open mind and some patience as things change. And the great thing is we've been planning all summer for sort of every modality and every possibility. So we're ready, kind of no matter what. And all of us have been teaching this material for quite some time. And I feel like we can be pretty nimble with however it gets taught. I would say too, I know I've shared this with my LSS colleagues. I taught an additional class for upper levels in the spring, and then I did that same class again in the summer, which was completely online. And I was really terrified that my online students in the summer would not get the experience of my in-person class of that very same material from the spring, who at least were in person until spring break. And I ended up finding just the opposite. My students in the summer had much better learning outcomes than my students in the spring. And I could measure that by giving an almost identical exam and seeing the median jump like 20 points. And so I have come around to think that, it's really a matter of effort and a connection with your professor. And so long as, if something's not working for you, whether it's in person or online, speak up, because we can adjust. We are anxious to get you to be successful. This is not a test. Like this is professional school. So you reflect on the university when you go out and practice law. And we want you to be good at that also for the general public who will use you as attorneys. So it's in everyone's interest to be the squeaky wheel. And if something's not working, speak up so that we can adjust and make it work no matter the format.
Great, thank you so much.
And I'll add that regardless of whether your section is meeting in person or online, you are going to get an abundant amount of time to work on your legal research and analysis and writing and citing skills, and you're going to get copious amounts of feedback from your LSS professor, and that won't change regardless of whether we're in person or we're online. And I'll say I was very impressed with my students' performance at the end of the spring semester. I think I was worried that the transition to remote learning would somehow impede their abilities to perform, but they didn't just meet my expectations, they absolutely exceeded them. And so to echo what Professor Gomez said, I think a lot boils down to both the professor and the students' efforts. And so like Professor Gomez says, we've also been planning all summer. We've been going to conferences. Professor Simpson was actually co-chair of a committee at the University of Houston on the fall preparations. And so we're definitely ready to hit the ground running.
Well, and I'll just echo too, there's actually a few things that I've been surprised that actually work better online. So for example, when I did some of the conferences in the late spring, the ability to screen share and then be looking at the same thing and still have the video there is actually easier than it is to look over somebody's desk to try to see what they're writing backwards on your paper. So there are little things where sometimes being online has actually made a difference. And so that's been a pleasant development too.
Great. So what I'd like to do is, I know there was one other question about how do students get access, or what is the access that they receive? If we want to chat about that. And then as we're coming up on our time limit, maybe we have some students just come off of audio and they can speak directly. So let's do that. I think we have 46 people. If anyone wants to use the wave function, or if you want to just come off of audio or chat, it's your time to kind of jump in and meet these wonderful professors. So let's start really quickly with what how they get access to LexisNexis, or what tools they will get. And I believe it's all given at orientation, but I'll let you folks answer that one.
I think Professor Hurd actually covered that in the chat function, and you will have access to Lexis and Westlaw, and we spend a lot of time talking about how to use those tools. If you're familiar with it, then you get to sort of help us teach. But in any event, you get access to those through orientation.
Great.
So you will have access before your first day of class. And I think you'll find many of us actually use a a learning management platform through the West Education Network. And so you'll need your Westlaw credentials to sign on to our web courses. And we'll talk more about that once you have your assignments, your class assignments.
Great. So how about our 1Ls? Let's have some questions. If you don't be shy, jump right in. Again, you can use the wave function. You can use the chat function. Let me see if I can get the chat function back here. And I was thinking of other questions as we're waiting for some folks to come on. One of the things I really wanted to hone in with our incoming students is that this part of your law school journey is going to have such a significant impact on your law school time, as well as your bar time as well. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, how learning to write in the way in research and how you folks are going to teach them is going to have impact on your law school exams. It's going to have impact on any competitions you want to participate on, moot court, mock trial. It's going to help you gain acceptance onto law review and help you with your law review. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And then on the bar exam, one of the most important parts of the bar exam, and one that's going to be graded, I think it's now up to 20%, is the multi-state performance test, which is going to be exercises that you all are teaching the students and you will be graded on. So if you want to talk about that, or correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of my impression of it.
No, I'll put in another plug for the Legal Writing Center. Our fellows actually create and host workshops throughout the fall semester and the spring semester on different legal writing topics, for example, citing or editing. But in the spring semester, 2 of their workshops are actually on legal research beyond the first year and legal writing beyond the first year. And those are actually 2 of my favorite workshops because I think it communicates how important it is for students to use these skills, or else you're in danger of losing these skills. So even though all of us are teaching a first year lawyering skills and strategies class, our expectation is that even as 2Ls and 3Ls, you'll continue to work on strengthening and developing those skills, whether it's through law review or a journal or moot court or serving as a research assistant. Or taking an upper level writing class. Professor Brehm has taught a very popular one in the past. And so I guess my advice would be, don't just think about legal research and writing as a first year skill. It is a law school and law practice skill.
I think I would add to that. It's what I said earlier. We spend the first part of our class teaching you how to be excellent law students. Then we move into preparing a writing sample, and the memo that you write for us, which most of us have as our big graded project in the fall, that's the writing sample you use as you go into your job interviews in the spring for your summer clerkships. And then in the spring, we transition into doing more things. And as Anne Margaret talked about, one of the things that many of us do is do some sort of practice preparation for the multi-state performance test. But that's the beauty. We talked earlier about the formulaic nature of legal writing. The beauty of what we teach is we teach you analytical skills, and you're going to use those every day when you get called on in class, in your doctrinal classes. And we're going to teach you this formulaic style of legal writing. And lawyers use that. I think Professor Reed said it best when she said, it becomes so much a part of who you are that you find it really difficult to read other reading. When people don't write like lawyers, it's distracting to you. So you'll take that formula that we teach you, many people call it IRAC or CREAC, and use that for your law school exams. You're going to use it for any writing that you do in practice, and you're going to use that for writing that you do for the bar exam. So these skills are things that you're going to take with you, and I think Professor Gomez says for the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years, as long as you practice.
Great. We had a question on chat, and I know it was answered on chat, but for the folks that are going to be listening to this as a recording, the chat function isn't, unfortunately can't get it recorded. So there was a question posted that, do you keep your professors from fall to spring? And I believe you stay with your same professor. Great. So let's see, I don't know if we have any other questions. I've said to the participants to don't be shy. We still have 44 people. Okay, during my undergrad, if we want 1 or more meetings with our professors, we could, okay, let me open this up. During my undergrad, if we want 1 or more meetings with one of our professors, we could schedule a time to hold a private office hour with our professors. I'm just going to let you guys answer this question. Looks like, how do you handle office hours? Great question.
I think it differs from professor to professor. I learned last semester, I really enjoyed the drop-in office hours. And then if one of my students wanted to have a private one-on-one chat, then I just had them, let me know, or we could use a breakout room to do that. And so I think you'll find that useful. And I swear there was something else I was going to say in regard, about keeping your class. If I can take 1 second to say, staying with your class all year is really a great thing for the LSS class. It's not just that you get to keep us, your wonderful professors, for a whole year. The more important part of that is you will find this group of people, because it's such a small class, becomes sort of like your law school family. Many times study groups develop out of these classes. This is really your moment to find people with whom you will have professional relationships for the rest of your career, not just law school. So anyway, there's a nice synergy that develops in those classes, and it's one of the many reasons why we retain our students for the whole year.
I will just very quickly say that for office hours, sometimes they're just the group Zoom sessions. Sometimes they're scheduled, it depends on the professor. For mine, I will set up what is called a waiting room on Zoom. And that means that I can let in one student at a time, and it allows me to chat with the people who are waiting. So there are just different ways that we'll do it.
And I typically, I have a scheduled office hour, but I also offer office hours by appointment. And generally I've seen students individually, but I've also seen students in group. It really just depends on the student's preference. I would say the only time I would not see a group of students together is if it is a graded assignment and they're prohibited from working together. But as far as whether I meet with a student individually or as part of a group, it is entirely up to the students and what works best for them. But I do encourage students to attend office hours. One of the things I did in the spring was I would send little email nudges with the Zoom link to my office hours, sort of reminding students that I'm available and eager to chat about either my class or just law school in general, or law profession in general. So office hours are one of my favorite parts of the job, truth be told. It's like awesome because it's individual teaching essentially. So that's pretty exciting.
I think Autumn had a question here. We had two questions. One, do all 1L courses span over the course of both semesters? I don't believe
No.
they don't. Okay.
LSS
Just
is the
ours.
only one.
Okay.
All the other ones, you'll just have a single semester.
Okay, great. Autumn had a question. Hi, Autumn. Is the Writing Center a source of extra writing exam practice? Or if we would like exam practice help, will we have to source and provide those practice pieces? So I'm going to let you guys, Professor Hurd, handle that one.
Sure. So the fellows in the Legal Writing Center are basically there to help you with whatever you need help with, so long as such help is allowed by the professor. And so if you, for example, get a practice exam from a professor in a class, you could, come up with your exam answer for that practice exam and then take it to one of the fellows in the Legal Writing Center to go over your exam answer, and they could give you tips on perhaps, you need to articulate the issue more clearly, or you need to conclude more strongly on one side or the other, or your rule statement is incomplete, or your comparison is not convincing. And so I would say if you can take something from one of your classes, whether it's from our class or a doctrinal class, to the Legal Writing Center for the fellows to work with, that probably would be a more meaningful experience for you. Just be aware of any sort of professor prohibitions on working with anyone else on that particular activity. And as far as the 1L class spanning, it is both semesters. However, in the fall semester, it's for 3 credit hours, and in the spring semester, it's for 2 credit hours.
Great. And as Professor Hurd was saying, or actually Professor Brehm was saying on the comment, most doctrinal courses, which are going to be your first year classes, substantive classes, we have what's called an academic enrichment program. And I think I've talked to a lot of you in previous sessions where if you need help, there are tutors that are available for your assistants, and those professors are available as well too. So I'm going to do a last call for our
I
Professor
would just
Gomez.
add one other
Absolutely.
thing, which is that you also, as 1Ls, will get a mentor group. And those are run both by, there's a faculty person involved, but it's really a chance for you to have 2L or 3L students who are in charge of the mentor group. And the group of students is those who are in your section, and then you're paired with upper levels who also had likely your same professors. And so they give a lot of tips and help and sample exams, and there's a lot of sort of informal ways to get that stuff too. And most professors also make things available purposefully. So when you say like, do I have to source, you know, like find practice exams, most of it is readily made available to you.
And I would caution using something that you just like find online, or that you get from some other person you know who's in law school or who went to law school, without checking with your individual professor, because different professors have different approaches to topics. And so I wouldn't necessarily want you spinning your wheels on learning an issue or a writing style that is not going to connect with your professor. One of the things here's a little sneak peek, but one of the things you'll learn in LSS is it's all about your audience. And when it comes to exams, your professor is your audience. And so your goal in writing an exam answer is to make your audience, your professor, happy. And so I would make sure that whatever exam prep you're doing is moving you closer to making that particular professor for that particular class happy.
Great point. So one of the questions before we leave is, I did have this presented on a separate email. What books or resources do you recommend during the semester that are not included on a syllabus? Are there any, or just stay with what's on the syllabus?
Stick with the syllabus.
Got it.
You won't
Okay.
have time.
Okay,
If
great.
you're struggling with a particular skill and you come to me and ask me, I'm happy to provide you with a specific recommendation to address sort of your specific struggle. But I think in order to really be effective, any sort of additional recommended text would need to be more tailored to sort of the help you need. And oftentimes, rather than recommending a book, I might recommend like a law review article on either, you know, critical reading or critical thinking or case briefing or issue spotting. And so my advice would be to go ask your LSS professor for a recommendation tailored to your question.
Great. So I think, unless we have other questions, are there any other thoughts or comments? Or I think it says, okay, we got a comment from Professor Simpson. I want to really thank all of our professors for taking the time out of your day, as well as our 48 participants that came to join us. And we've really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone's found it helpful. Professors, Carrie Crieta wants me to do a quick snapshot of my phone. So if you don't mind, I'm going to try to do it on my phone, a little screen, and she likes to post it on social media, but we'll of course get your approval at first. So with that, I'm going to quickly take my phone, take a snapshot, and I want to wish everyone the best of luck in the next couple of weeks. Please stay safe. We're all thinking of you. We are here. The admissions team is here, and we'll see you at orientation. And if you need anything, you just yell out. You guys know where to find me. So I'm going to take this quick selfie of us all, and hopefully I can knock that out. There we go. And I'll send that off to Carrie. Thank you all, everyone, and I hope to see you all soon.